All right, so a couple more people arrived and it's just on time to start. So welcome to everybody for our third in this series of the triple decker, the pocket trainings. So yes, my name's Miffi, and I really love these three higher trainings because they're skills to make our life immediately better and happier. And just that they're called the three higher trainings was a hint to me that they're actually something we have to practice, that they may not come easily or naturally in the beginning. Just like, for instance, you may not be able to drive straight away or cook straight away or be a parent straight away or dance or whatever it is. You need to have a little bit of practice, and that's okay. I think many times in our life, we just expect ourselves to be able to do something first go straight away and then get really upset when we can't. The three higher trainings are things that we actually need to practice, and then we can get good at them, and then we experience the incredible benefits. So the benefits of these three trainings is that not only does it make our own life better immediately now, but they are the three things that we need to train in if we want to become liberated from all problems forever. And who doesn't? And if we want to become enlightened, you know, to be able to help everybody else, all those crying out for help, if we want to be able to help them, these three trainings are the things that we need. So they set us in really good stead. So if you remember the analogy that we've been using for the three higher trainings is this wonderful one of the person cutting all of the delusions at the root with the axe of wisdom. So we've got all of our delusions, you know, this tree of problems that arises and continuously, like a hydra, you know, we get rid of one problem and another problem arises. We solve one thing and the next day there's another one. Just think of the internet. I mean, you fix this bit and then that bit breaks. So that's kind of like with our tree of delusions and problems, just trying to deal with it leaf by leaf. So with wisdom, we can cut the delusions at the root, just one thing, and the whole lot go. The whole tree of problems disappears. So this axe of wisdom, or the sword of wisdom, is so incredibly important. What holds that together, what means that that sword of wisdom is not dangerous, is the two arms. Remember, the strength of concentration to keep our mind on the job, to remember our wisdom when we need it. That's the two arms of high concentration. And then what gives us the strength? The embodiment of ethics. So ethics meaning we embody all of our principles and our values. We don't just believe in them or subscribe to them. We actually live them. So the three of those together, then you know, we can do anything, including attain liberation and enlightenment. So the thing with wisdom, which is today's one, is that just like, you know, most of the time when we have a problem, we try and put in an antidote or we try and fix it. And for a little while that works. It's kind of like having water on the stove. You know, the water's boiling, it's boiling over, it's really agitated. So let's just put in some cold water to calm everything down. And most of our life is like that, just putting in more and more cold water. And then after a while, everything bubbles back up again. So wisdom is like taking the pot off the stove altogether. It removes the actual cause of the agitation of the problems. So I'd like to start actually with this quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We are at the center of all of our troubles. It's therefore best to work at understanding our true nature first. So this is really lovely, isn't it? Because it takes us straight out of being, caught by being a little bit too intellectual, or lost in the theory of things, where we can become a little callous, and it takes us right back to lived experience. It's us that experience problems. It's human beings, it's, living beings that experience problems. So rather than starting with just theory, kind of disconnected from anything else, even though it might be intensely interesting, start with applied theory, applied to oneself, who experiences the problems and the suffering. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama again and again says that love and compassion aren't enough to solve our problems. They're definitely needed, but just alone, that's not enough. To directly combat the ignorance and the confusion that leads to our problems, we need to have wisdom. And not just any wisdom, but a particular form of wisdom that actually is the one that cuts at the root. So it's like a specialized axe, or a specialized sort of wisdom. And if we can have this wisdom, if we can develop it, then what it means is that the other two parts of the three higher trainings, the ethics and the concentration, they won't degenerate. It also means that if we have the support of concentration and ethics, our wisdom won't degenerate. So they all play in together. So I thought I'd start with an easy thing with wisdom, which is beginner's wisdom. And the kind of wisdom that we need as beginners, you might have heard already in some of your studies, the wisdoms of listening, reflection, and meditation. So these are three easy wisdoms to set us in good stead. So the wisdom of listening, the kind of wisdom that arises from coming to teachings like this, from reading fantastic books by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, going to teachings with Geshe Sherab when he was there at your centre. This kind of wisdom of listening and research, it's not just kind of being passive and listening, but it's actively seeking out teachings like Doris does, actively like getting yourself there to all of those teachings. And the wisdom of listening is to do with where our intellect comes in. So even if we have a problem, instead of just collapsing under the weight of the problem, there's a little bit that goes, has anyone else in the world ever experienced this before? Like even if it's something as serious as feeling suicidal or feeling really lonely and alienated, instead of collapsing down underneath it, the wisdom of listening is the wisdom that little voice that says, hang on a second, has anyone else in the world ever felt suicidal? What did they do? How did they deal with it? And then with that little spark of wisdom, the whole vista of human experience opens up for us. We have all of these resources there. What did the Buddha do? What did Mandela do in prison? So then you can see how crucial that one is. Then the second one, the wisdom of reflection. So this is where we take all of the teachings and all of our juicy reading and all of that intellectual excitement, and we apply it. So not just reading about the wisdom of emptiness, for instance, but applied emptiness. Not just concentration or the nature of reality, but applied wisdom, lived experience. And so what it means is, just like they always say in the lamrim, that these instructions were meant to be practiced. They're practice instructions, not just intellectual entertainment. So everything that we read or study, we've got to think, how would I put that into practice? How does that apply to my life? Try and think of specific examples, play it out like scenarios. Just like when you have a fire drill, you have the idea in your head, then you do the fire drill and everything stuffs up. It's really good to know that. in a nice controlled environment. So the wisdom of reflection is like that, a fire drill. You practice some things and you see how they play out, and then you come back and you regroup. It's like beginning to internalize the medicine of the Dharma. And the third wisdom for beginners is the wisdom of meditation. So, you might think meditation's like sitting there with your eyes closed, being all quiet. No, that's not actually, that's just maybe what it looks like. What meditation actually means, the word in Tibetan means familiarization. So at the moment we're familiar with all of our negativities, we're familiar with doubt, with anxiety, with depression, all of these things, deeply familiar with them. So what we've got to do is become familiar with our wisdom on as deep a level. So that means becoming so involved with this wisdom that it becomes second nature, it becomes instinctual. So part of that can happen when you're in a meditative state where you're not distracted by everything else around you, and you're using a lot more than just your intellect to think about something, but it's going deep, deep, deep in. You can tell that you've developed this wisdom of meditation in a very simple way, that when problems happen, you remember your Dharma wisdom. That's what comes to mind. Instead of panic or instead of just defaulting to past negative habit patterns, what you default to is your Dharma wisdom. It's there, accessible for you to use. So that only comes from that third wisdom of meditation, of deeply familiarizing ourselves on all levels as intensely as we are familiar with all of the negative stuff. So then with this kind of wisdom, this is what the context of everything, all of our experience is within. So that when we have that wisdom and we're out in the world, we don't succumb to racism or sexism, to just the environment, to people yelling at us, to all of those things. We don't just default to our most common kind of nature, but we automatically draw up our Dharma wisdom. So I've kind of thrown these three in at the beginning because it's something that we can all work on. The wisdoms of listening, reflection, and meditation, or becoming familiar. And especially as beginners, then we might be tempted to think that reading is enough, but it's not. That's just the intellectual, that's just the start. And if we leave it at that, if we just leave it at reading, we can become more and more intellectually smart and knowledgeable, but also more and more depressed. Believe you me, it's a big trap to fall into. And we fall into it because we forget about the deepening our understanding, playing it out in our own life, and then making it so deep that it becomes our instinct. So if you take nothing else from today, that's the thing that I want you to take from today. So we are at the center of our troubles. It's therefore best to work at understanding our true nature first. And so that approach, that really integrated approach, is the way to do it. So then where do we start with the special wisdom, the wisdom that cuts the root of suffering? Actually, before I go on to that slide, I've got to give you a bit of preamble. So the special wisdom that we need is a wisdom called the wisdom realizing emptiness. So the wisdom realizing emptiness, in colloquial terms, we can think of it as the wisdom understanding reality, the true nature of reality. And because we're disconnected from that, all of our problems arise. If we develop this wisdom, realizing emptiness, wisdom understanding reality, we'll be able to become free from every single problem in one swoop. So the root of this wisdom or the root of actually the root that we're cutting is something called self-grasping ignorance. So there's the self part and the grasping part and the ignorance part. Those three, we need those three words. So the self-grasping is because, just like His Holiness said, the self, we're the one who experiences the problems. So we have this idea, this feeling of who we are, and then this terrible thing happens. We grasp at it. We hold tightly to it. We become inflexible. We have a very concrete view of reality. This is right. This is wrong. Like them, don't like them. This is the way it is. The grasping onto the appearance. And it's a form of ignorance. It's a veil. It distorts us like a terrible funhouse mirror. So this is the one that we have to cut if we want to be happy. We can cut all sorts of other confusions and ignorance, but it's not going to help us. If we want to be happy, this is the one that we've got to directly work on. So I've got a little bit of theory, and then I've got a really amazing example to pull it together. So all phenomena arise by the collection of many conditions together. Because of the collection of many conditions, there is no inherence. So what on earth does that mean? That means that phenomena or things don't actually exist out there, don't exist in those parts, don't exist the way that they first appear to us, but they do exist in a very particular and very subtle way. And in fact, existence itself depends or is based on dependent arising, many conditions. Because everything, our whole experience, our problems as well as our happiness, depend on other things. This is like our get out of jail free card because it means things can change even when things appear terrible with no hope. They can change. This is fantastic. So if this is true, then how come we haven't got it yet? How come we're still suffering? And the reason is we confuse the dual nature of reality. We confuse relative and ultimate. This is the root of our suffering. In terms of our own lived experience, everything that we think is me, the essence of me, the one that suffers, that's actually a relative thing. It's not an ultimate thing at all. That's just all of our conditions and circumstances coming together to make a person. And who we think of as our ultimate is actually what we share in common with everybody that makes us the same as everybody. The wish for happiness, the wish to be free of suffering. That's the universal thing. So we get it totally opposite. We've flipped them around and all of our suffering comes from that. Things, including problems, don't exist in the way that they first appear. Now, you might have already heard this at Buddhist teachings or perhaps at a magic show. I've just been watching Penn and Teller on TV, and that's pretty incredible. Things certainly don't exist in the way that they first appear at a magic show, and that's why it's so delightful, and it's why it does your head in as well. So what this actually means is that to an ordinary mind, things, appear and we just think that's how they are. But to someone who's not burdened with misconceptions, who hasn't confused the nature of reality, the dual nature of reality, they know appearances to be an illusion, and so they're not sucked in. So what does this mean for us? What this means for us in particular is that any problem or suffering that we have, even though it feels bad, it's not by nature bad. And even though it's unpleasant, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing and nothing good can come from it. So that really solid appearance is deceptive. And ironically, whenever we, especially with problems, by going, no, 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 I don't want it, that actually is grasping at it. Grasping in the fact that we are solidifying it as something we don't want. So the term grasping is in itself even a little more complex than we first realize, because whether we crave something or whether we push it away, both of it is grasping, as in really solidly holding to it is exactly how it appears. So really what we need is a whole lot more courage, isn't it? So I have a little story to read you and then our example. So this story is from Nyung-ne Rinpoche, Practicing the Path. So there's a great section in this book on these 3 higher trainings, the triple decker, really practical. So this is the story. And he says, if you close your fist and pretend there's something wonderful inside the palm of your hand, and you make a lot of noise and get very excited and tell a child to come and see, merely by your behavior, the child will grow certain that you're holding something really great. On the basis of this, that child will generate great hope, expectation, and excitement, and will wait with eager impatience for you to open your hand and share. As long as we habitually grasp at the true existence of all of the people, things, and events in our life, we are just like that child, and we are susceptible to exactly the same mistake. So all of those hopes and expectations that we build up and then are dashed, it's because we're grasping to it as if there's something really there, and then we find it's empty. And actually that emptiness is brilliant, but it's because of all of our hopes and expectations that then they're dashed. So I wanted to give you an example of how we grasp at reality and what it does to us. So here's the example. So here's this picture. I don't know what these are, like A and B. They're maybe typewriter keys or buttons of some sort. So just have a look at the picture and, you know, what can you see? Have a look as much as you can see. I mean, in a way, like clearly there's a horizon. It could be sky and a field. It could be a blue wall and that horrible sticky carpet that you get in the pub. And then, you know, the typewriter keys A and B. And, you know, what color are they? Doesn't matter if you're colorblind, because, you know, clearly A looks like grey and B looks like white, doesn't it? So this looks straightforward. The whole thing, it just seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Now, what I'd like you to do is get your finger, close one eye and hold your finger along the horizon so the horizon line disappears. And now tell me, what color are the keys A and B? And take your finger away and look at the picture again. And what color are they? Clear as day. Now put your finger back again, obscuring the horizon line, and what do you see? Does that do your head in? So tell me what happened, folks. Were you all able to see it? Yeah, so what do you make of that? This is our lived experience. Who's going to venture a comment? Doris, what do you make of that?
Don't trust your eyes.
Aha. And what else?
Perspective.
Perspective? Yeah. So what made the perspective?
Taking out the contrast.
Yeah, the contrast, and it's kind of like that horizon line.
Just boggles my mind.
It's great, isn't it? So what about somebody else? What do you make of it? What can you draw from this? Mary, what about you? What do you reckon?
Miffi, I wasn't sure I was blocking out the right horizon, and I really didn't see a change.
Ah, you got to put it like closer up. So I'll put it up again. And so here we have, you can clearly see, right? There's two keys. Now just block the horizon with your finger. Close one eye. So this one, I mean, it's worth coming back to again and again, because one way it appears two different colors, and the other way it appears the same color. And that's when we take that context out of it. So really, this is something that how our mind grasps at appearances as true. And we're absolutely certain those two keys are two different colors. Absolutely, no one could tell us anything else. Then we take away that distinguishing line. We take away the context, and now in an absolute sense, they are the same. And then not only that, then our mind goes, well, which is it? Which is the real one? And this is the thing about this wisdom. There is no really. What we have is a dual nature of reality. On one hand, in the context, we have two different things, but those two things depend on the context. They're not separate from it. We take away the context, we look at the ultimate reality, they're the same. So just from this really simple experience with us, now how do we apply it? What's the lived wisdom of this? So the lived wisdom of this is that, for instance, if you're thinking about racism, so James Baldwin said this amazing quote. He said, I am black only so long as you think you're white. It's interesting, isn't it? That black and white only exist in context with each other. And especially from thinking one is white, then that creates black. So what this understanding, and especially with this analogy, what it does is it shows us that on an ultimate level, we are all the same. You know, under the skin, we're all the same. But on a relative level, there clearly are differences. So it saves us from both racism and from pretending there's nothing wrong. Because on a relative level, there is a context, and there is white privilege, and there is racism. And that is the relative context. And because it's relative, there's something we can do about it. And on the ultimate level, we are all the same. And that's on the ultimate mode of existence. So that can then mean that we are all us. Everybody matters. And we go back to the relative, and then we go, therefore, if we're in a position of privilege, we must look after the vulnerable. So, you know, it's quite a jump. We have the theory, and then we take it and we apply it. So similar also, for instance, with COVID, you know, so we have the experience of COVID. Everybody around the world has quite a different experience now. Some countries like Australia, we're very lucky. Other countries in America is quite patchy. Then what we're seeing, you know, in India is horrific. But if we just take our experience, here we are at a Dharma Centre, and our first experience of COVID appears terrible, doesn't it? But we forget to look at the context that makes it appear like that, and it's not separate from the context. And then we see that actually the experience for many Dharma centres around the world with COVID is now suddenly we're all online and we're able to enjoy teachings across the sea, across the ocean, be in each other's lounge room, just like that. So is it good or is it bad? What makes it good or bad is the context. And if we just hold to one context and think that is the ultimate truth, we're in big trouble and we miss out. So, of course, the other thing when it comes to lived experience, applied emptiness or applied dependent arising, for instance, with COVID, is that then within that, seeing that for us there is a silver lining, within that is this responsibility to help others, because we can't see ourselves as separate from others. The world is us. Everybody matters. So I'm going to go on. We'll in your notes, this picture is there, so you can just, you know, cut it out and do the experiment and contemplate on it. Get you 3 wisdoms of listening, reflection, and meditation happening. But in terms of applied wisdom, again, what's happening when we see an illusion like that and we think it's real? It's called cognitive fusion. So just like they say, hey kids, don't do drugs. Well, for a Buddhist, you're going to have to say, hey kids, don't do cognitive fusion. So cognitive fusion is where we believe all of these relative appearances to be true. I mean, what could be simpler than that? But let's see how it catches us out every time. So we've got fusing the behavior with the person. I mean, all of us have heard this, don't judge the behavior, judge the person. But that's really hard, isn't it? So here we have a screaming kid chucking a tantrum in a supermarket. So some people will look at this and go, oh, evil child. But most people and possibly parents will know, no, this is a child totally dominated by their craving and suffering. So not a bad child, but a child acting badly, throwing a tantrum. Now, a slightly more compassionate parent, wiser parent would say actually a bad child or a suffering child, a child expressing suffering. So despite the tantrum, we're looking below and we see under the tantrum, we see suffering. So it changes our response, doesn't it? So actually, a Buddhist would look even deeper than this and go, well, is it just a suffering child or is it a potential Buddha screaming to become free? Because all of our suffering is our Buddha nature trying to break through. Our suffering shows us exactly where to look, exactly where the problem is, exactly where we've mixed things up, where we've mixed up the dual nature of reality, relative and ultimate. When we mix it up, we suffer. That's our Buddha nature pointing out where to look. So I've got a couple of other examples of cognitive fusion. So these are, I kind of like them because they're modern psychological terms, so they land nicer in my mind. So there's one called cognitive deficit. So this is where in a difficult situation, we're blind to any benefit, so we cannot change. So is there anyone here who hates going to the dentist? I mean, maybe I should ask, is there anyone here who loves going to the dentist? So if you have a fear of the dentist, this is known as cognitive deficit, because what happens is an overarching fear just blanks out any possibility of benefit. And so we know that if you put off going to the dentist until you're in agony and your jaw's swelled out to here, and possibly, you know, you get septicemia and possibly even die. People nowadays die from toothache in the modern world. You know, and we get to the dentist and the dentist says, well, I wish you had have come earlier because we could have fixed it, but now the whole tooth has to come out. So that fear and believing that fear, that's cognitive deficit. We cannot see anything good about the situation, anything good about the dentist. All we see is the fear. What about this one? Cognitive hyperactivity. In a pleasant situation, overestimate enjoyment and forget the consequences. So this could be a picture of me with too much champagne or too much martinis. So, you know, with this one, has anyone here ever had a hangover? I'll put both of my hands up. Okay. And when you had that hangover, did you say, that's it, I'm never drinking again? I'll put my hand up for that. And then what? Then you have another hangover. And you know, for someone like me, that happened not just once or twice, but it happened for years. I was continuously surprised by my hangovers. Now, some people are really smart and they have one or two real corkers and that's it. They're done with drinking forever. But I had a bad case of cognitive hyperactivity, which is overestimating the benefits of champagne or vodka. And then reality crashes in the next day and I'm surprised. So you can see we're really our worst enemy, aren't we? So the hyperactivity thinks, the drink will bring happiness, and that's all we focus on. It'll bring us happiness. And we forget the rest of the story. There's a delayed reaction. The rest of the story appears and we go, what? Oh my God, I can't believe I did it again. So this is what's meant by grasping at appearances. The fear of the dentist, that's grasping at appearances. The craving for another glass of champagne because it's going to be even better, that's grasping at appearances. So grasping in that we hold very tightly and think it's true, whether it's something we dislike or whether it's something that we like. And that holding tightly to the appearance is the problem. The appearance isn't the problem. The appearance is just there. But we do this extra thing, which is grasp at it and believe it is true. It's like that old cliche, you know, judge a book by its cover. Well, we judge reality by its cover, and that's why we suffer. Because you can see it leaves us no room to change and no room to find a solution. And it's the very thing that brings us the problem, that brings us the suffering. So I've got one more example. Oh, hang on. So tell me, do you have any questions about this, about the cognitive hyperactivity or the cognitive deficit? I hope I haven't put you off with those words. I really love those words. You know, if it's got a contemporary word, then it must be true, right? That's my own grasping. Comments, questions? Was that Mary waving at me? Yep, we're Mary Jo Whiteman. Oh, hang on, we've got to ask to unmute. Here we go. Go for it.
Thank you. Actually, this is just a little bit before that, but you said something I didn't quite mix. My sound is really garbled from one time to another time, but you said something about a potential Buddha wanting to break free. And then when we mix it, something, but I did not catch about that. If you could just tell me what that was.
So this is from one of the perspectives from a Buddhist point of view is that whenever we have a problem, it's an unpleasant feeling, but it's evidence of our Buddha nature trying to burst through, because our Buddha nature, our wisdom, is not sitting well with how we're looking at the world, how we're viewing the world. There's a conflict. So that conflict is because our wisdom's trying to burst through and our ignorance is covering it. So wherever we have problems or suffering, that's exactly where to look. So in actual fact, it's a good sign. And from one point of view, within the, the Buddhist teachings, suffering is a good sign because it is evidence of our wisdom trying to break through. So when we have, is it a bad child? Is it a suffering child? Is it a potential Buddha screaming to become free? So just that in itself means that our grasping at problems as being just terrible has to loosen, because we go, yeah, it's a problem. Yeah, it's awful, but there's something we can do about it. There's another way to look at it. And in fact, the other way to look at it is closer to reality.
And could it be then that in those cases we sort of stop and look for the wisdom part?
Yeah, so there's two things, Mary Jo. So one is that wherever we're having a problem or unhappiness or things are not sitting right, that's where to start. So not over here with the theory, but right here where it hurts. So in a way, that makes things very easy for us.
Yes.
And then as long as we're suffering, then we know we haven't got all the pieces of the puzzle. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us or that we can't fix it or anything like that. It means that whilst we are still suffering, we haven't got all the pieces together yet. So keep investigating.
Yes, and it's probably not another drink, but it's, but it's, yes, like you said, to investigate all possible angles. Yeah. Thank you.
And then when you find a new angle to look at it, you immediately experience a sense of relief. Immediately the problem comes into perspective and you get that aha moment. So whilst we're still struggling and suffering and everything, then just keep looking, keep searching. Then we get that aha, I've got it. And so that's kind of like going from that wisdom of listening and research to now the wisdom of familiar of contemplation, reflection, going, aha, that was the bit I was missing. Now that's interesting. How does that fit in? How would I change? So you back and forth and back and forth. And then after quite a while of contemplation like that, then that becomes your new reality. You become familiar with that. And then your reality changes.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Mary Jo. That was a great question.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I had just a comment, I guess, but if I can remember it. But that takes time and patience. That is not like a quick snap of the fingers, not like I'll just pop a pill and feel better, or even maybe I'll take a walk and feel better. Although sometimes a change of scenery, I think, really does happen. But I guess we can't really let out of our side vision the fact that we're searching for something here that's that hasn't revealed itself yet, maybe.
That's right. And you're right, it does take it takes perseverance and patience for the result. But I think courage. It takes courage to research. And this is why they're called the triple decker, why they're called 3 higher trainings, because we do have to actually train in them. Just like if you're driving, you can get in the car and drive straight away, but it takes practice to become a good driver. But whilst you're practicing, you're enjoying all the benefits of driving. And with cooking, it takes practice to become a good cook, but you get to enjoy the process. And the same here. Don't think that it's just all hard slog. You actually get to enjoy some benefits straight away, which is relief. But you're right, it does. There's definitely, we have to put effort in. Just like we can't just sit around and hope we become a good driver.
Right.
We actually have to do something. So it's the same here, they're definitely trainings. But here's something to give you all hope. So, for example, it's like going to the movies, right? So we've all been to the movies, haven't we? We've even paid money to go to the movies. And if you're stuck at home, you probably even got, some subscription, Netflix or something or other like that. So how come, even though it's not true, how come do we spend money on it? So we know it's a fiction. We know millions of dollars have been spent to present this fiction to us, and yet we pay good money to partake of this fiction. So why? Even, it's an illusion. It's impermanent. It appears real, but it's not real. And yet we want to be involved. So this is how we can look at life. It's like a movie. The movie's there, but it doesn't exist in the way it appears. But it's there and we interact and we're changed because of it. And we can go with a group of friends to a movie and everybody has a different response. Someone loved it, someone hated it. Same movie. So what is it? Is it a good movie or is it a bad movie? So it all depends, doesn't it? So the key here is that when we experience our life, when we're in our life, it is like a movie in that it's, there's stuff happening. It's there, but it's not quite happening how it first appears. It may be one of those movies where there's subtitles, and you've got no idea what's going on and you need to have help someone explain it to you. And then maybe it's a movie that sticks with you for a while and it changes your approach to life and to people. Now, if you've been to scary movies, you're like not watching, not looking. So why do we do that? That we take ourselves out of being super involved to stop our fear. We have what we call metacognition, where we tell ourselves, it's just a movie. It's a director, and that's actually Nicole Kidman, it's not whoever. And so this metacognition that we have, we're trying to get the ultimate reality rather than be stuck into that relative experience to give ourselves some relief. So this is also what we can do with our life when we lead our life. We're so involved in it, we think it's all true, we believe everything, and then we respond as if it was, as if this is a good person and this is a bad person, like a good character and a bad character. And then sometimes things get so bad, we go, I've got to get this metacognition happening. So we pull ourselves out and we go, hang on a second, ultimate reality, there is no good character and bad character. And it gives us some relief. It's just like peeking in between, it gives us some relief. So this changing of the context, it's a very powerful tool. I really like this one too, because with a movie, it's not like we go, the movie doesn't exist. So we don't fall into nihilism because we are still there experiencing things, physiologically, the popcorn's gone everywhere. We've had an experience, even though what's happening is not true. So it's a very nice balance, and we're very used to it with the movies. And in fact, we enjoy it. We enter fully into it, knowing what's happening, and it enhances our life. So it's the same with relative reality. We can enter into it with this kind of wisdom, knowing that it's not true, doesn't exist the way it appears, but nevertheless, there's something happening and we can benefit from it. We can share it with others. So we won't fall into essentialism, and we won't fall into nihilism. We're not denying there's a movie there. There most certainly is a movie there, but it just, exists in a totally different way from what we first thought. So here's some little takeaways for us. Re-education is the solution. And we've all had an education. We're used to this. We can do it already. We're very good at it. Most of us can read and write and get this information. So the first thing to re-educate ourselves is to remember there's a discrepancy between appearance and reality. There's always a discrepancy. Even to Arya Bodhisattvas, there is a discrepancy between the appearance and the reality. The difference between an Arya and us is that when an Arya sees reality, they see it like a movie. They know that it's not true. Whereas we're just 100% sunk into it. So it's like the first time that they, I think the first movie ever made in the world, was made by the Salvation Army in Australia. And they made a movie of a steam train coming towards you. So you can imagine what happened, right? They're showing this movie in the cinema. The steam train comes towards you and there is a stampede out of the cinema. Everyone's screaming, people fall over, everybody gets hurt because they had no idea. So that's like we are, because we don't know, it's not real, then we have all the reactions, then there's a stampede and everybody gets hurt. So there's always this discrepancy, but the thing is that we believe the appearance is reality. That's where the problem comes. Remember, don't do cognitive fusion. Hey kids, just don't do it. Don't do cognitive fusion, or at least for us beginners, to try and recognize when we have cognitive fusion, when we are fusing the person with the behavior. It happens over and over, doesn't it? Just think of someone you don't like. Pick a politician, any politician, and we just think, oh, bad person. Right there, we've fused person with behavior. Now, remember, they're not a bad person. They've got bad behavior. Clearly, some of them do. But they too are a Buddha, a potential Buddha screaming to become free. They too suffer. They get miserable just like us when we have the flu. Their dog loves them. Somebody loves them. So cognitive fusion, it happens to us, but it's so incorrect. A really good rule of thumb is to, especially when investigating Buddhist philosophy and the nature of reality, is to work on your own mind first rather than the abstract philosophy. So even within Buddhist practice, it's not just talking about emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness. It's actually starting with oneself, the wisdom of selflessness, no inherent self, no real me in here somewhere. Always start with oneself, and that'll keep us grounded. Otherwise, if we just start with the philosophy, we could be tempted to just end up with a world of absurdity, being very disconnected from our life and our loved ones. So I think of this as always trying to applied emptiness. So where do we start? Developing the wisdom of selflessness, no inherent self. So this is like that example with the two colored keys, you know, the black key and the white key. It appears like there's inherence there. It appears like that one's black and that one's white. But that appearance is totally dependent on the context, on the line, on the blue sky, on the green carpet, on the context. If we remove that context, we won't find an inherent self. We'll find a universal experience. And so the wonderful thing about developing this wisdom of selflessness is that it connects us to others. We will never be lonely. We'll never feel alienated. So this is one of the things, you know, if we are feeling disjointed from the world, if we are feeling lonely, many people when they're stuck at home feel lonely. So there's the rub, isn't it? So Mary Jo, it's like that. Oh, then maybe that's where the suffering is. So let's look in there. Let's look right there. What's the nature of loneliness? What are the assumptions behind loneliness? What am I operating on here that's the result is loneliness? And if we start developing our wisdom of selflessness, recognizing that there is no inherent self here, what will happen is we feel one with others. We recognize they're just like us. They're close in our heart. They might be physically distant. That's just a minor detail, but they're close in our heart. So then we're never lonely. We're never alienated. We're never fearful. We'll walk into a room, instead of being shy, we'll be so happy. Okay, then what else? We've got, oh yes. So in terms of wisdom and re-education, what we want to be thinking, remembering too, is that this is kind of from a social point of view, in a way, that we live in a post-truth world. So a post-truth world means that whatever news and information we get can be the whole gamut, from wisdom to total misinformation and fake news. And it's very difficult for us to pick out what's legit and what's not, what's valid and what's not. So in a post-truth world, it means, for instance, the term fake news, that now kind of just means, oh, I don't like it. And because I don't like it, I'm going to say it's not true. So it's very much like a Alice in Wonderland absurdity experience, isn't it? So how we can counter this, and it's so important, is to always check our sources. Who says? Where's the evidence? Check with your own reasoning and logic and your own experience. And have the courage to really investigate. Especially now that it's so, you know, you can find information to agree with what you think wherever you like. Then, once we've got valid sources and we've tried and tested it from this angle and that angle, then we've got to retrain our thinking. And not just our thinking, not just like the wisdom of selflessness or the wisdom of emptiness, but retrain our feeling as well. And this is a real tricky one for us Westerners because we might think one way, but if we feel another way, that's it. We go by our feelings. We think we're all intellectual and smart, but actually we go by our feelings every time. Something feels bad, we think it is bad. There's cognitive fusion right there. So we have to retrain our feelings to do with conventional reality. And this is why I put a funny little picture of a house down the bottom, because at first when we're retraining our feelings, it's very crude how we're reframing our reality. is quite crude, like a kid trying to build draw a house. You know, it's a bit of a stick figure. And I remember when I first tried to draw houses, you know, I had the chimney coming off at the wrong angle. I couldn't figure out the chimney's supposed to be vertical. So, you know, you're all clunky and whatever, and it's really hard to get it. But after a while, with training, we'll end up being able to draw beautiful architect's drawings, wonderful mandalas. So all of those architect's drawings and mandalas, that comes from training. Simple as that. Re-educating ourselves from practice, from study and research, from reflection and talking about it and contemplation and tossing it this way and that way with our Dharma brothers and sisters, to actual deep, visceral understanding. And the way that we train is by using our words to reframe reality, because our words are so powerful. That's the place to start. Don't try and start with the feelings, start with the words, and then the feelings will follow. And a really nice way to do this, especially with problems, or especially when you're faced with people that you don't particularly like, think that you're being like a reporter, and you go, well, what would the Dalai Lama say? How would the Dalai Lama describe this situation? What would the Dalai Lama say about this person? And actually, it might have similar content to you, but the way it's said would be totally different, right? So, Mary Jo, did you have a question? Yes, go for it. I've asked you to unmute, Mary Jo.
I did not know you were speaking to me.
No.
So I just would like to have a little bit of more of your ideas about these sources of information. You know, it's pretty hard unless you spend a great deal of time researching. I mean, you know, I have some news sources that I kind of listen to, you know, NPR and stuff like that. But how do you go about checking out those things that you hear? I mean, I don't even listen to certain TV programs, you know. I mean, well, I don't even have a TV, but I guess that's a good beginning to not listen to TV at all.
How do you check? Mary Jo, it's a really good question, and the answer can be both, can help us with what news sources that we listen to, but also where do we get our spiritual guidance from? So the Buddha gave us a wonderful 4-point checklist about this, of how to tell if our refuge is a valid refuge, meaning if what we're taking on board is going to help us and is true and valid and legit. So one of the things is that so as a refuge, that they themselves must be free from the problems. So in terms of our news sources, you know, they themselves must be able to actually report on what they're talking about. So that cuts out a whole lot of just opinion. You've got to be able to actually report on the things. So whether it's about politics or vaccinations or child rearing, you have to be able to report about the thing that you're talking about. And not only that, you have to have had some experience in it yourself. In terms of a spiritual practice, whoever we put our confidence in must themselves have had some spiritual practice. Not just like the idea of it, but actually themselves accomplished realizations, had experience. So that's one. Second one is they have to have a method to free others. So not only...
I'm sorry. If you could it's
so
horrible
Mary
I
Jo,
cannot hear. If you could repeat maybe the last two sentences.
Yes. So not only that they have themselves experience and freed themselves from the problem, you know, raised the good kids or been able to clean the house, they have to have a good method to share. They have to have a way that will help us. So, you know, our friends might want to help us, but they don't have the skills. So the person has to have had the success in the experience and have a method to share. They're the first two. The second two are that they have to have no favoritism. So they're going to help everybody, those that they like and those they dislike. So this is very interesting for politicians. Politicians have to help everybody, the Republicans and the Democrats. They have to help the rich and the poor. Can't have favoritism. And equal concern for one's friends as for one's enemies. So this kind of goes into two things. One, regardless of what you get back, whether you get money or fame or not, whether you get praise or not, and to help those that are close to you as well as the others, to help us and them. Now, if someone doesn't do that, you know it's going to be a problem. If there's partisanship, there is going to be problems, even if there's compassion. Because if you just care for your family, but you don't care for the next door family, your compassion will end up with conflict. And that is a tragedy. So you've got to have this meta-analysis. So Mary Jo, that's the four qualities of a valid refuge, but it's also a very good checklist for what philosophy you're going to follow, what spiritual path you're going to follow, and what news source you're going to listen to. So in terms of, you know, who funds them, what's their hidden agenda, what's their stated agenda, what's the result? Is it education or is it conflict? So you have to work it out for yourself. And we have to do our due diligence with everything. We have to do our due diligence with the news, with what philosophical system we're going to follow, with who we have as a teacher. It's no good just to have a teacher because they're charismatic. You have to have a teacher because they know their stuff. They practice what they preach. They don't have favoritism. You know, they're going to teach whether they get money or they don't get money. All of these things, you have to do your due diligence. It's on us. We have to do our due diligence. We can't wait for the teacher to say all of those things. We have to check up for ourselves. And then, I'm sorry, gone a bit over time here, but then what you get in Buddhism is a particular kind of faith. It's not faith based on hope or anticipation, but it's faith based on reasoning and logic. And so you have confidence, whether you feel confident or not, you have confidence. Just like we have in science, you know, we just have confidence in it. So it's really important. So that's another approach to our wisdom. So just before we finish, you know, we've got our 3 higher trainings, the concentration, the 2 arms that hold our wisdom, that hold our sword of wisdom that cuts suffering at its root. And so that concentration, part of that is our due diligence. You know, that's the strength of those arms that hold the wisdom. We've got to hold to it right to the end. From the beginning with due diligence to seeing it through to the end and sticking with it, and not just losing our train of thought, or not kind of being mid-swing and then dropping the axe because we've forgotten what we were doing, dropping the axe on our toe or something like that. And all of this is supported by our core strength of ethics. Without ethics, everything just falls in a heap and we hurt ourselves. Without ethics, wisdom can harm others, can be cold, hard truths instead of liberating, loving truths. So the homework, really fun homework. If there's anyone here who ever goes shopping, if you go shopping, this is the task. When you go to the shop, look at the shelves and the packaging without getting sucked into what the goods are. And every time you look at something, go, oh, merely labeled. You know, so all the brands, instead of going on this brand, that brand, go, oh, merely labeled. There's a label, merely labeled, because that's how things exist. Merely labeled by mind on a valid base. So we forget, we get sucked into the advertising. We go, oh, I want this and I want that, da, 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 da. So what you're going to do, get some metacognition here. And when you're shopping, look at the shelf. Is it up the shelf or down the shelf? What's the display like? What's the color like? You know, what causes one of those things to look more alluring than the other? It's all the context, the packaging, the label. So try and pull yourself out from the stickiness of being sucked into it and just say, merely labeled all the time, merely labeled. It's a great Buddhist joke. And then you can transform shopping into the path to enlightenment. So, look, thank you so much for your indulgence and your time. And I hope this has been beneficial, and I really hope to catch up with you all again some other time on the wonderful interwebs, the webs of light, holding us together, holding the world together. So let's dedicate that that all of our good-heartedness and our attention and our efforts actually go towards developing this wisdom that can liberate ourselves and others from suffering in all of its causes. Thank you so much, everybody.